Hello guys, welcome back again. So in this video, let's talk about what is a control component. So usually you would have seen the form component, label, input, all of those in HTML. So by default, when you want to render those elements without using any React concepts, those comes with kind of default behavior, and if you would like to not wanting to use those the default behavior and you want to add React specific stuff or do that in a React way, then we'll have to control that component differently. So in that context, basically we call the component is kind of a control component. So what that means really, let me give you an example here. So let's say we have a regular HTML form element, right? And then let's take an example of a label. Then in the label, let's say we have name, and then let's take input element, which is type equal to text, right? And then let's introduce input type equal to submit and value equal to submit. Okay, so we haven't used any of the React concepts here. There is no state involved here, right? But when we try to let's render this component. Okay, it's starting. Okay, so we got the input and submit button, right? So I'm able to enter the value, right? How is it possible that it's able to capture the element that the text you're entering and it's able to display it, right? That means by default the input element, it has a default behavior behind the scenes. It kind of has a default state, right? So I mean, it's all happening behind the scenes and we don't have any control on that, right? How we wanted to capture that value, right? So how do we do that? For example, as I'm entering the value, I should be able to capture. So once I'm done with this value, when I click on submit, it is able to submit that value now by using the default behavior of form. So form by default, what happens is when I submit a value, it submits it and then it's going to re-render that page. So that's why you see that the value is kind of disappearing from the text. So we don't want to have this behavior when you are doing it in a React way. So how could we get that control to us? So that's where we're calling this kind of how could we convert this into a controlled component, right? So for that, let's use this state. So let's say we wanted to capture this name, right? Then let's use that name and then set name, use state. Let's put a default value empty there, and then for this input, let's capture it from name, right? So now we are passing the name from the state. So what does it look like here? Let's drag this here. Okay, so you're not able to enter the value. See, I'm typing, it's not able to capture because we overrode the default behavior. Now we need to inject the concept, so we were able to capture the value as we enter it. Okay, now let's introduce the on change functionality. Basically we wanted to capture that every time we type something, we change something in the text box, we wanted to set name to that value, right? So what do we change, what do we get from here? We basically, as we type it, we get an event to that function as input, and then from that what can we take? We wanted to take event dot target dot value. So what's happening on change, as we type it, it calls this function, and then we are setting this name function here, and this value will be set to name. Since we are changing the state in the name and we are using that name here, that value will appear in input, right? For example, see, right, it's appearing. Previously it was not, because there is no one setting that value to that, right? So now we make this input as a controlled element. Now how could we get rid of the default submit behavior of form? So now if you submit, let's say test, right, submit, the form is submitting that, we wanted to get rid of that. For that, what we do is, let's say on submit, and then we write a function here. So from this function, what we want to do, what's happening when we submit, it is kind of submitting the value and then it's re-rendering the page, right, recalling the page. So let's prevent that, prevent default event. So what we can do, when we submit, when we click on submit form, it's going to call this on submit function, and then it will get the event, so we can prevent default. So what we are saying is, this event has some default behavior, don't do that. Okay, so that's what we did just now. So with that, if you type value and then submit, see, the default behavior will not come into picture. So at this point we got this component into our control. So this is called controlled component or controlled elements, or whatever we call, right? Basically we injected a React concept into the default behavior of form. And now what we can do, for example, on submit, we want to capture what's the value entered in the input. Now since we already set that value in that state, the name, all we have to do is alert that. Let's say we wanted to alert and then name, right? So let's submit this. See, we got the value. Now we can do whatever we want with that value, right? Usually what we do, we send this input to the server. So here basically this is where you will make a API call, and that could be one of the other these hooks, which could be use effect, where you would be making calls and getting the response and stuff, right? So this is a pretty simple example of what is controlled component, so that's all guys for today, for this video, and we'll catch up with the other concept in the next video. See you there. Bye.